with Jackie Asima Mwesige, Godbert Mushabe, and Norbert Mao. An appeal is in vain. The arguments the IGG made before the court were flimsy and unconvincing. For instance, they argued that a provision of the Constitution was inconsistent with another. This cannot be cured on appeal. That's a listener. Didn't leave their name. Another listener here wants a quick answer. Jackie, will you provide an answer? Institutionally, if it was fully staffed, does the inspectorate have the powers to amount to anything in the fight against graft? That's Joseph.
You know, I think the struggle the institution would have is there is a tap that's flowing, and all the institution is trying to do is mop the water, but the tap is flowing, and unless we stop the tap, going back to Angelo's issue, unless we ensure efficiency in service delivery, then the tap is flowing for forever. So even if it were fully constituted, even if it were fully funded, as long as there are ways to still be corrupt, corruption will just flourish. And so we need to stop that tap.
Joseph again says, what does the law say about the duration in which one can act? In short, for how long can one act? 6 months? Acting time is 6 months. Yeah.
There have been people who are acting on 2 years, 3 years, but it doesn't only happen with government officials. It's a very prevalent form of exploitation in the private sector. You have like probation periods that never end, acting.
But the idea that you get...
what does the law say?
The idea that you get these constitutional bodies, that you put there people who are acting, I think for me is the fallacy. It's really a violation of the law.
We have seen these contestations in the case of Makerere University.
After the acting period, if you haven't chosen someone, then they should automatically become the substantive.
But Jackie, my point is, you can appoint someone acting as executive director of National Forest Authority, but do you appoint an acting judge?
It's not, no,
an acting IGG? Because there is something about the Constitution that you cannot equate with everything. The moment you start equating the Supreme Court with Makerere University and with the National Forest Authority, then you've lost it.
Acting
in terms
VC.
of even the hierarchy that Angelo talked about, because those institutions must be held in high esteem to be able to, like for the court to adjudicate among all these other agencies.
Without the undue pressures of
don't I have the
uncertainty.
full powers? Don't I holding it as if I was?
Yeah, but why are you acting?
The substantive.
Because there is a judge of the Supreme Court, and that's a judge. So why do you have to be acting?
I think the uniqueness that Godba is raising here is this is a constitutional body, is not another entity.
I understand that.
Robert Okello says the office has lost meaning because of the selective manner in which they execute their work. I think that's what Norbert was talking about.
And I wonder if the judges actually, looked suspiciously at, because they also read the newspapers. So there's a partisan element here. Look, I appreciate the ruling is trying to get some clarity on this issue, and if you look at the jostling between the different arms of government, I think it's a healthy thing. But these judges should sincerely, if you're going to be do judicial activism, you have to think about children who are not getting the kind of treatment that they require, and what havoc corruption is doing, to our public sector. It's for smug judges to sit there and simply apply themselves to the law as if corruption is an abstract, and that this institution is somewhere, in there.
But don't you think, Angelo, that if the courts were to just affirm the fact that the appointing authority can have all these institutions with acting people, don't you think that would also do long-term harm to the autonomy and independence of these institutions?
I agree that issue had been addressed, but I'm saying even more strongly, perhaps, the message that the courts would send is not only appoint, but state quite clearly what this institution of the IGG does.
Yeah.
The judiciary is not blind, to the everyday victims of corruption. They are right outside their doors, and I don't think that they should to have been blind in this judgment to that fact.
Mao, let me bring this back to you. What would you have done? You've read through the judgment, and you're a lawyer. What should the bench have actually done in line with what Angelo is saying?
Usually, judges are not supposed to lean on the side of technicalities. Usually judges are supposed to ask themselves, do we totally frustrate the end of the constitutional provision? I think the constitutional provision is to ensure that the IGG, first of all, there is the office exists. It has staff. There are some office bearers who are missing. Now, even the mere fact that they are able to take this case means that they have a functional capacity. So this business of splitting hairs, actually this is something which can create a constitutional crisis. Thank God we have a constitution.
I think that there is already a constitutional crisis. If you have an acting Inspector General of Government for 2 years, I would call it a constitutional crisis. Because that's not what the framers of the constitution never intended, that the Inspector General of Government would be enacting. I think it's
perhaps we should ask the question, why isn't Baku confirmed? Why
I think those are the relevant questions.
Do you have an answer for that?
Those are the relevant questions.
I don't know.
Because if you
who should answer the question?
If you are acting,
President Museveni has to ask to be asked, why doesn't he make Baku the Inspector General of Government?
Yeah, because if you're acting for 2 years, it points to the fact that maybe you are incompetent.
It is like Tumusime Mutabile. I mean, here is a person who should have gone home for a variety of reasons. But President Museveni acts out of habit. He just gets into the habit of trusting certain people. That's why we have generals who even get promoted when they are retired. These are anomalies.
Let me take more feedback from our listeners. Mubiru Samuel says, but on Gilbert Bukenya, the ex-VP was active. Ex-VP was active. But when it comes to Sam Kutesan group, it became powerless. That is the judiciary. Oscar Anthony Osika says, members for the IGG to effectively function, I strongly believe it should only constitute of the opposition mainly for it to audit government projects well. I don't know what the panel has got to say about it. No, but
I think as a general rule, that cannot be accepted. The IGG is supposed to be sort of colorblind. Otherwise, you will frustrate the very objective. What we need, I think what we need in this country is for people who exercise power to know that even they are subject to oversight. The IGG is subject to oversight by Parliament. Actually, the IGG is supposed to report to Parliament. The Human Rights Commission, which is another constitutional body, is supposed to report to Parliament. But they are the body that is... I haven't heard them comment on the banning of F4C. The last time they came for our meeting, they were talking like, they are part of the Uganda police. They were condemning those who are demonstrating, not talking about these trigger-happy SPCs shooting anyhow. So these constitutional bodies are in what you'd call a stranglehold of the presidency.
Okay, I need to run through these messages. Lex says, why is it that most of our corrupt leaders are just brought to book and then after they are let free without serious action? Jackie, do you have an answer?
We have, I mean, I don't have an, I think we have often said that, beyond prosecution, how do Ugandans get back the money that they have lost through corruption? So I think beyond judging a person guilty for corruption, we need a process where either properties are where the money is gotten back.
Edmund Munanura Rwagura says Museveni has deliberately weakened the institution to save his lieutenants. Period. Nyokatra Kennedy says the biggest problem is not the institutions, but whether these institutions can be given space to work independently. Atwaire Edwin says the office has perennially been used to deal with those that were deemed to have fallen out of line. The whole office should be disbanded altogether because it has dangerously flirted with selective prosecution and incompetence for so long.
But that bears comment. It's true that corruption sometimes, or corruption charges, are simply a way of punishing disloyal subjects.
Okay. Nwandinda Ivan says it is only weak when it comes to big shots in government. Otherwise, in my view, IGG should comprise of officials from both parties, not NRM cadres. Tumhimbise Roger says, who is to blame for the powerless institution of the IGG and what can be done to strengthen it? Sunday Apollo Randy says, why was this IGG office put in place? It was due to the inefficiency of the DPP's office. The decision was politically motivated. I pray IGG appeals against this ruling. And Ogwal Diana Ijang says, what was he asked to act upon? It is true he was put there to save those lieutenants intentionally. Acting IGG, just resign and save yourself from Museveni drama. And if we can't get the IGG, who is fully appointed, let the office be scrapped off and save that budget for saving the women of our land dying of cervical cancer and can't afford even testing.
We didn't need that organization.
Our time is up. We need to get out of here.
It was donors that pushed this organization.
Your last word?
No, my last word actually is the comment that was made by the last contributor there, that part of our problem as a country is that we have tried to solve any problem that has emerged by creating a new institution
or a new law.
Yeah, or putting in place a new law.
Jackie, your last word?
No, again, I think if the president is also at test here, if he is serious, I think we are watching the space and he must appoint. He cannot shirk the responsibility for forever.
No, but
if Parliament had stood its ground, the president would have been forced to make the necessary appointments.
Absolutely.
933 KFM hot seat comes to an end. You're part of the panel. You're like me.
The hottest debate on all relevant topics, live
every evening 7 to 8 p.m.
KFM Hot Seat in association with
Nile Gold, a crystal malt lager beyond an ordinary malt.
KFM Sports.
It's fantastic!